Have you ever heard a song playing and immediately know who it is?
No, I know that sound. That is Justabel Flaroque.
That's an artist's sound, their sonic fingerprint, and the best artists all have it. In this video, I'm gonna show you an exercise to help find that sound for yourself, and it's easier than you might think. I've been struggling with this for like 10 years. I've spent countless nights lying awake in my bed thinking, how do I find a signature sound? How do I find a style that feels authentic, but that doesn't box in my creativity? If you've ever found yourself asking the same thing, don't worry, because I've recently had an epiphany that will shed some light on all of this. And that epiphany involves paper. So you don't actually need paper, but it's gonna be very helpful to visually see all these ideas. You can do this on your phone or whatever. To find your sound, we're going to need to fill out this triple Venn diagram. Your sound is going to be the intersection of these three circles. No sheet of paper. Oh yeah. So once we have all three of these ideas, we'll be able to determine our sound, but to make things easier, I'm gonna break them out into different parts of the paper. Let's start with the first question that we'll need to ask in order to find our sound. What kind of music do you like to listen to? A lot of times the things we like to listen to are the things that shape our own sound and influence what our sonic signature is. How many times am I gonna say sonic signature? I don't know, but I definitely like how it sounds. You can think of genres, artists, you can think of just specific sounds. I'll fill this out for myself so you can see an example of how to do this. So for genres, I like alternative, indie, pop, and you can get even more specific than that. You can say melodic, rap, you could say house. Subgenres are totally fine. The more niche you can get with this, often the better results you'll get. Some of my favorite artists are Foster the People, Jungle, Sophie Tucker, Bruno Mars. I could go on for a while, but hopefully you get the idea. And for some specific sounds, I like live instruments. I really love a good synthesizer. I love a clean electric guitar tone. Notice that these kind of range from being very general to very specific. That brings us into part number 2 of our Venn diagram, and we're gonna go for, and that is, what are you good at? I'm assuming if you're some sort of musician that you're not just bad at everything. There's a chance that you can actually play a chord on the guitar. There's also a chance that you can maybe write some lyrics, and that's what we're gonna explore with this category. This could be something like instruments, this could be skills, anything related to music is totally fine here. For example, myself, I play the guitar, piano, I like to sing. Those are all things I would consider myself above average at or good at. And then when it comes to skills, some skills that I think myself as good at, I'm pretty good at whistling, but that could also be more concrete, like lyric writing. And then you can even get more specific and granular. For example, like writing drum parts. Melodies would be a good one. Synth programming. If you're just starting out, you might not have as many as I do right now, but that's just more encouragement for you to spend more time making music. The more time you spend, the more you'll be able to grow what you're good at. If you're struggling to come up with ideas in number 2, another idea you can ask yourself is, what do you find easy in music that others find difficult? So what easy for you? Is there something that you could spend hours doing that others might not enjoy? Maybe that's soloing. Maybe soloing is super easy. Or maybe that's identifying a song by ear. Or maybe that's just writing a million songs. Maybe that's your superpower. And honestly, the more songs you write, the easier this entire thing becomes. Idea number 3 is, what keeps coming up in your tracks? Idea number 3 is something that only happens after you evolve your songwriting skills, after you've written and made a lot of your own original music. But to find your own sound, it really is important that you experiment with all of these. The first idea is something that's accessible to everyone. The second takes a little bit more coordination and practice. And then the third takes the most amount of time and dedication to find, but it arguably might be the most important out of these 3 on the Venn diagram. If you haven't yet written at least 10 or even 20 tracks of your own, I'd recommend doing that first before hopping into this and trying to find your own sound yet. You're still experimenting experimenting and seeing what sticks. Idea number 3, what keeps coming up in your tracks? More than anything, feeling and vibe. When you make songs, do they tend to be more dancey? Do they tend to be slower and more introspective? It kind of goes along with BPM. Do you find yourself making faster songs, slower songs? If so, that might be something you want to explore that can define your sound. But more importantly than these big picture things are almost the small things that tend to define a sound. Change the vibe, the BPM, the song structure, and still have a sonic coherence between different songs that an artist releases. Do you always use a clean guitar? Do you always program electronic drums? That's something I do. I literally don't have a drum kit in the studio. It's a pretty small space, so I have to sample all of my drum kits, and that's part of the reason why it's a part of my sound. You always subscribe. Wait a minute. Now, that's not in my tracks, but it is a good reminder that you should go hit that subscribe button. Another thing that might come up in your tracks might be lyrical ideas. Maybe you always talk about the same types of things. Maybe you always talk about love or overcoming adversity. That can be part of a signature sound. And then probably the most advanced thing that I like to think about comes from a music theory lens and using specific scale modes and chord flavors. Sometimes using different scale modes can define a sound of an artist. For example, AC/DC loves some Mixolydian type sounds. Now that we have all 3 of these ideas somewhat fleshed out, we can put them on our actual Venn diagram and start filling them out to decide what our sound should actually be. Now, I know what you may be thinking. You're thinking, Maddie, doesn't your sound find you rather than you decide your sound? I'm here to say, no, that's not kind of how it works. You methodically pick what you like, whether you realize it or not. You're thinking, I like this sound, I don't like this sound. And the more that you practice and refine that taste, the more easy this is to put into place. I'm gonna take some of these ideas and just put them into the categories that I think automatically go into the middle of the intersection. For example, I really like indie music and electronic. I tend to make a lot of that in my tracks, and I think that I'm pretty good at both of those things. So let's go indie, electronic. I tend to be pretty good at the piano. I tend to be pretty good at making synth lines and vocals. So I'm going to try to put those in there. In terms of like feeling and vibe, I would say they're more upbeat, and I'm kind of going for like a happy type fast song. So this is option number 1 for me when it comes to sound. We could do something completely different as well. Another thing that I might want to consider as I choose my sound is what already exists in the music market and what do I want to hear that's completely new and different. It's a lot easier to be the leader of a new genre than it is to be the follower of a genre that already exists. And because I have a lot of skills that I would consider myself good at from doing this for 10 years, it's easier for me to choose these different genres and kind of combine them in new and interesting ways. For example, I really like the 70s vibe of jungle, but because I'm limited on my studio, I might want some programmed drums, which they don't always do. So I could combine 70s jungle with some programmed drums and then maybe some melodies idea from Bruno Mars. And all of a sudden, I have something new. Another thing to consider that's very important for the final sound or signature sound is your instrumentation. I'm just picking things I like from artists I like and trying to combine them in new and interesting ways until I have something that feels really organic, new, and like me. Distorted guitar, programmed drums, whistling, folky lyrics. I don't know what that genre would even sound like, but it's definitely worth me experimenting with it. All of this would be for nothing though until you have the biggest tip that I learned that helped me break through and quote unquote find my sound after 10 years. And that tip is your sound isn't you. Your artist sound is not your identity. It's just a tool that you're using to be creative and express yourself. That means it changes over time, and it will absolutely change over time. For me, I was putting so much weight on getting the perfect sound that I just chose no sound. But the more I detached my own personal ego from this sound, and the more I saw it as a creative experiment, the more likely I was to actually release something and finally pick a sound. It was giving myself permission to fail, which in creativity is one of the biggest things you can do. There's also nothing stopping you from experimenting with these different ideas you might have and creating multiple artists for each one. At the end of the day, you get to make the rules. Now, coming up with a sound is really important for branding and for your identity as a musician. But if it sounds badly produced, nobody's gonna listen to it in the first place. And if you do wanna learn how to make it sound better, I'd recommend watching this video right up here that shows 500 hours of music production tutorials in 27 minutes.